Welcome to another episode of Under the Strap. I'm your host, John Rathouz, and on this episode, I'm joined by Scott Fawcett, the creator of the Decade Golf System, one of the most influential products in the game of golf in the last decade. Scott has helped professionals and amateurs alike to shoot lower scores and played a big part in the careers of Bryson DeChambeau and Will Zalatoris. Lots of concepts discussed in regards to strategy, caddying, of which Scott has done quite a bit. His highlight being a win at the U.S. Junior with Will Zalatoris. Also, distance and speed, a big factor in his opinion on who's better at the moment, Cam Smith or Rory McIlroy. Whether you've heard about Decade or Scott before or not, there's tons of great info to take in over the next hour. Enjoy. All right, happy to be joined now under the strap with Scott Fawcett, creator of the revolutionary Decade System. Revolutionized the golf world, my man, and helping players of all abilities save shots. Thanks for taking some time.
Absolutely, man. You're one of the guys that was one of the first ones I talked to however many years ago about a lot of this stuff. So I always enjoy circling back with the guys that were early on.
Absolutely, and there's always stuff to learn, and I've utilized a lot of your stuff over the years when I've been out there caddying. So I'm interested to hear some of your takes, and you've obviously had some opportunities to caddy, and so it'll be cool to kind of mesh those two together. First of all, though, congrats on getting married recently.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, it's been pretty fun. I've been dating her for about 4 years. I've been divorced for 6 years now. I've been with her for 4. She's super cool, and it was kind of fun.
That's cool. And also, thanks for taking a break from banging some 4-irons. I was following you on Twitter earlier today, and you're always seeing how far you can hit it, getting that club head speed, the ball speed out there. It looks like you're in a few competitions, friendly back and forth.
You know what's amazing about that is, honestly, the other day I was just screwing around. My driver kind of makes me mad sometimes because I don't get a very high smash. I don't feel like I get the ball speeds I need. But then I was just trying to speed train with a 4-iron, and I hit 150 mile an hour ball speed. And I was like, wow, I did not expect that. And then Andre Benamar, or however you pronounce his name, the old NHL player, he posted 153, and I wasn't dead on maxing out at 150, but I was going hard. He posted that, so I'm like, okay, I'm going to try. And I posted he posted 152, I posted 153, then he posted 156, and I'm like, okay, when I did the 153, I was really trying. But then seeing him do that, I'm like, well, let's see. And then I hit 158. I was like, and what's funny is I had 9 at 157 and 158. And just a couple days prior, I couldn't believe I hit 150. And then I thought 153 was all I've got. And then it's just amazing how much more there is in our body. And that's the thing, again, obviously I'm one of the biggest proponents of preaching, hit it as far as you can. It's just not everybody has 20 or 30 yards in them. I firmly believe if you haven't been doing any speed training, 100% of the population can find 30 yards by Christmas with just intention. And then you do need to start doing some speed training and lifting heavier and whatever, but everybody's got distance in them.
Yeah, I worked on it a little bit earlier on this year, found some gains. I got away from it with the stack system. And then also when I worked for Steven Yeager this summer, the trainer that he was working with, Mike Carroll, who a lot of guys on tour are using, had just a very simple drill for Steven where it was maybe 3-4 times a week at the end of his session, kind of when his body was warmed up. We don't want to get injured here. He was doing, 8 to 10 full swing drivers, as hard as you can hit it, doing that 3 or 4 different times in a row with a little rest in between. And Steven's just seen his ball speed go up and up and up. He was a high 160s guy, and now he's topping out, that 180 and when practice, and then he gets out on the course and 175 is becoming more realistic. And so it's interesting though how much, and I want to talk about this maybe a little bit later, but just the science of golf, and you were at the forefront of it, and just how much it's just exploded in the last 10 years or so. 10 years ago, maybe 15 for sure, nobody was talking about ball speeds and swing speeds like we are now, right?
It's crazy. Again, I'm the guy that told Bryson to do what he did, but I did it 2 years, 3 years before, even 4 years, maybe before he actually started. I went up to caddy for Zalatoris at the Pat Coast Am at Eugene Country Club. And this was after Bryson had won the NCAAs, but hadn't won the U.S. Amateur yet. And I knew he had the big ball and the fairway finder and whatever, but we play like the first 4 or 5 holes at Eugene, which is just a tight tree line course. And finally, on 5, I'm like, well, I want to see it, dude. Show me the big ball. Because I think it's insane that you're going to tell me you've just got another 50 yards in you. Because, he's just bunting it out there 290, 300. And then he tees it up like an extra 2 inches and just literally puts an extra 10 plus miles an hour ball speed on it. I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, you have to use that. And I would give anything for that kid to see him now, because his answer was, yeah, you just can't do that very often or you'll hurt yourself. I'm like, you're going to finish second in the world long drive contest in a few years, man. Like, you just can't, I can't believe what the guys are doing. But then watching him at the US Open, and I remember tweeting immediately, I can't wait to watch the PGA Tour for the next 5 years, because 100% of the guys are going to try to find distance, and probably 90% of them are going to do it wrong by just going out there and starting to swing harder. And that's what most people don't realize. Bryson did shoot 6 or 9 months of like prep work, joints and just everything before he even started trying to go harder and lift harder and everything. But it just felt like it was overnight because of the pandemic. It just felt like overnight he gained, but he'd already been working on it with Como for like a year and a half at that point. It just seemed amplified because of the way it went down. But like you say, back to analytics and everything. Well, the other podcast I was just telling you, I was just on, like, the best analogy is, did we actually need data to tell us that hitting the ball further is a good idea? Did we actually need data to tell us shooting threes is a better idea than a mid-range jump shot in the NBA? Like, so much of this, I agree, is so obvious, but until you see the numbers, and even for a lot of people, once they see the numbers, they still don't believe it. It's honestly insane, to be perfectly honest.
You bring up Bryson. What were some ways that I mean, because you were right there, like inspiring him, kind of leading him along, down this path of distance and using the decade system. What were some ways that he inspired you? Like, what was that back and forth like, for the last whatever decade or so?
It's so interesting because that's a great question. And I hate saying that my answer is not really anyway, because what I did, it's just math. So like, I solved a math problem, and then it's about ways to get people to adopt it. But there's nothing in the math that's going to change. And so a guy like Bryson, he helped me figure out better ways and new ways to teach it. And he would call me like from a practice round at the US Open and just be like, in this scenario, it was the one that was at Oakmont, I believe. That's the one he played as an amateur before turning pro. And he's like, is it possible? So we rate the surrounding hazards anywhere between -2 and 3. And 3 is just the hardest up and down possible. And he was like, can everything be a 3? And I'm like, based on what I'm hearing from some other people there, yeah, it sounds like everything is a 3. We want to get the ball on the green as fast as possible. And so with him, it's been more stuff like that. And then just honestly, but learning from Como and him about, like, I do think most people at speed play a fade better than a draw. DJ Brooks, Zalatoris, all these guys. But he's playing a draw with it, but he's able to play a draw because he's got all his entire left arm at the end range of the joint's mobility and then the weakest left-hand grip possible on the club. So he's trying to hit a duck hook while trying to hit it as hard as he can. And his body's literally can't get the club in a position to hit a duck hook. So I would say, honestly, like, trying to walk that back a little bit now, like learning stuff like that. Because when I was in high school, you would see the guy with the strong grip and be like, oh, he's a hooker. Like, no, find me a guy who can play golf with a strong grip, not named Zach Johnson, that hits a draw. You're not going to find it. You won't find any that do it with any speed.
That's interesting. Well, then you mentioned some things in there. You said, oh, that's a 3 and all this and that. Like, let's give a brief explanation of what decade golf is, for people that I think a lot of people have heard of it, but if you're going to explain it to them in just kind of the most fundamental way, how do you go about explaining what it is you designed and what people utilize on a daily basis when they're competing?
Well, we've got just a couple of inputs into the decision of where to aim a golf shot, any given shot. How long is the shot? What is the surrounding and, most important, the adjacent hazard? So the hazard that is closest to the pin. What is the wind? And then what are the course conditions, basically meaning how firm and fast are the greens? That's really all there is to it. And so what we start with at the tour level is essentially like in 2004 when I met Como. We're playing in an illegal underground poker game here back in 2004 when he and I meet and become good friends. And I started playing a lot better golf because I started playing like poker mindset to the game. Like I am a lunatic on the golf course. And so, like, if you saw that video circulating the other day on Twitter where the guy had lost his mind over in Australia, did you see it? It was amazing. It was in their club championship or something. This guy is just absolutely losing his shit. And that was actually me. And so, just applying poker mindset of, man, when somebody sucks out on you, you've got to say, hey, great job. You've got to encourage them to play the hand the exact same way to get your money back. It was just more obvious to me in poker, like, hey, getting mad doesn't help here. I never got that lesson in golf, but so I started playing a lot better golf by applying poker mindset. And then as the strokes gained statistics started being released in 2011, I wrote a thread on an online poker forum called 2+2 that was just titled, Is Drive for Show, Putt for Dough really true? And it was a bunch of really bad math, but you could see the wheels starting to turn. And so just really starting to understand like mindset and math and just the strategy of it. I was like, where in the hell was I going with that? Back to what decade is. So now once all the strokes gained statistics started coming out and we know how many strokes it takes to hole out from anywhere on the golf course, basically down to the inch from any lie, fairway, green, rough, bunkers, trees, whatever. If you can combine the size of a shot pattern with the strokes to hole out, you can pretty much optimize target selection, which used to be like this mystical idea of like, well, this is a harder shot. Let's go more towards the middle of the green here. And the best way that I explain this to people is like, middle of the green is quite often just as bad or even worse of a target than right at the pin. You're just being too conservative far too often. Or the flip side is middle of the green on a hole like number 10 at Pebble Beach is actually too aggressive because the green's not wide enough for the length of a shot you typically have going in there. And then you've got a water hazard on the right. You actually need to be aiming like left center of that green or even left edge of that green, depending on how far you have in.
So yeah, and that was on my notes because I remember that example you have, and it's a great example. And anybody that's been there, iconic hole, and it's just such a small green, and oftentimes you're coming in with like a mid iron into the wind and stuff. Just explain that concept to me, because if I'm, my objective, I guess maybe you need to reclassify what your objective is here. But if I'm trying to get the ball in the hole and make par, or maybe I'm going to make a birdie, and you're telling me to aim it basically in the left bunker, that just doesn't compute in a lot of people's head. Why am I doing that? Because if I hit it there, then, that's not a good result. Why didn't I just go at the pin? So I think that's where people kind of miss a lot of times, like, hey, there's a dispersion here. Like, you're not perfect, I think is kind of what you're saying. You have to kind of play to that fact that you're not going to be perfect and give yourself the best opportunity. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, well, the analogy is just if I had you hit a 6 iron, since we said mid iron on 10 at Pebble, if I had you hit, 56 irons on a driving range, your shot pattern at the tour level is going to be 25 to 30 yards wide. That green number 18 at Pebble Beach is 17 yards wide. If I'm aiming at the middle of the green, even, that means that I'm going to put the right 7-ish yards of my shot pattern in the hazard. And you cannot overcome that. But by aiming, let's just say, 4 yards from the left edge. So we're not aiming all the way to the left edge of the green, but we're aiming left, splitting the difference between middle of the green and left edge. Now the right side of my shot pattern, because again, if we're doing this correctly on a driving range, aiming at a blue flag, we're going to miss half our shots left and half our shots right. Well, now in this scenario, we are aiming still on the green. The right side of our shot pattern, the entire right side of our shot pattern is putting. The center of our shot pattern is putting, and even the left couple yards is putting. And then we're going to start getting the bunker and even left of the bunker. Well, if the scoring average on that hole is 4.4, then you think about taking all of those remaining shots and holding out. And obviously on the green, we're going to average at least under 2 because the greens are so small there. We're going to have some that are accidentally close. If the pin's on the right side of the green, I don't need to aim a left edge and then hope I push it. Like by definition, I'm going to push it about half the time. And so that's one of the main things I think tour players specifically get wrong is they pick pretty good targets. I think overall, these guys aren't total idiots. They pick good targets, maybe 4 or 5 yards away from a pin, and then they hope they push or pull it close. So now you're taking what is like by definition a shot, a hard shot. That's why we're aiming away from it in the first place. And now you're putting kind of an uncommitted swing on it. You've never hit a shot on a driving range, but I hope I miss it 5 yards right. So now we're putting this uncommitted, wishy-washy swing on the hardest shots of the day. And the way that you think about this is now on the range, I hit 50 shots. My shot pattern with my 6-iron is going to slightly resemble a shotgun blast. And the reason we need to aim away from certain holes is if I actually had a shotgun here and I had a paper plate on a wall and I said from 20 yards, hit the paper plate. Well, you would aim directly at the paper plate. Your shotgun blast would be bigger than the paper plate. But if instead of 50 pellets coming out, only one was coming out and you didn't know which one, you would want to aim at the dead center of it so you've got the best chance of the one that happens to come out hitting it. But now let's put your mom standing just left of the plate. Well, we don't really want to hit mom, so we're going to aim further right. Well, that just means, well, now only the left side of my shot pattern is going to hit the plate. Like, that's fine. We don't want to hit mom. The right side of my shot pattern, like but that's really the way a shot pattern works. I know which shot you want to come out. You just don't know which shot is going to come out. And that's the main thing. Again, like a lot of the reason of having a conversation like on, the Caddie Network is you have to convey these ideas to your player. And back to Zalatoris, when I caddied for him in 2014 at Texas A&M US Junior, before the tournament started, I was like, how's this going to go wrong? This kid's a strike show. I mean, obviously, at this point, we all recognized he hit the ball as good then as he does now. Like, it was insane. Obviously, his putting can be a little sketchy, and his short game was sketchier back then. Now it's incredible. But I was like, I just feel like he's not going to play committed to these targets. So, like, I was very clear with him, when I give you a target, you really have to attack that spot. That's why I post that video of Tiger so often when he was in the booth at the Hero 5-6 years ago saying, I play aggressively to my spots, which are probably more on the conservative side, but I'm still playing aggressively to my spot. And like, nobody else does that. That's, to me, the key. And that's, again, whenever I entered like Korn Ferry Tour Q school as a 49-year-old a couple months ago, I know I'm not as good as these guys, but why am I wasting 6,500 there? Well, that's a good question in its own, but how am I going to actually be competitive? I'm going to do that by driving it better than them, by playing committed to my targets on my approach shots, and by lag putting well. That's my only chance. And I go out and beat some really good players. I missed by a shot at Korn Ferry Q School, which as a dude who doesn't play much golf, I'm going to take that. But that's all I did. I tried to do the same thing with the driver, try to play committed, aggressive to my spots, and try to lag putt it well. And that's just not that hard to do.
The committed thing is very interesting. I went out and played myself yesterday. I got 9 holes in. And there's so many variables a lot of times out there, and you talk about like swing mechanics and stuff and all that too. But one thing that I really noticed, I was playing golf with another friend last week, and he's a former PE teacher, 65-year-old guy, was a really elite basketball player, played professionally for a while. He's a real good athlete, and he just plays very instinctual, and he just plays hard, and he hits so many good shots. And what I notice is like, how committed he is to it. He pulls his club. I'm just going to hit it. Like, he doesn't. And I notice a lot of times when I'm playing, like, I'll be like, all right, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to hit it. But then I kind of like guide it there. And yesterday I made this very conscious effort to be like, all right, I made all the math in my head. I did where the target's going to be. I plotted out how far the ball's going to release once it hits on the green. I got the wind, all that. I had 135 yards to pin. I've got a 9-iron, but I really want to hit a 125-yard shot. I'm going to grip down on the club a little bit. I'm going to swing at it. And I really committed to that. And I was pleasantly surprised at how often it at least replicated that versus like this guidey action. And I think it trickles all the way to the pro level. You're talking about that right now, but that's like the biggest thing that people miss out on maybe in translating some of this is just that commitment to hitting these shots.
And that's where I talk about block versus random practice so much. They've got all these studies that show changing your targets and changing your club and all this stuff translates better to the golf course. I'm like, no, you're just forcing them to slow down. You can accomplish all that same stuff by hitting at the same target over and over and over again. But what we're really needing to accomplish is slowing down and really ingraining that mental chatter in your head of, I'm orienting myself to the golf ball the exact same. I'm committed to my target. And so it really is about, in practice, slowing down a lot and playing with a lot more commitment, because it's not a magical pill that's just going to switch on when you actually tee it up in a golf, tournament or round or whatever. And so much of that is just, it's obvious, but it's just not. I mean, again, I give these seminars all around the world, and I was giving one in Miami a couple years ago, and I've got like a 60-year-old lady in it, and I've got I can't drawing a blank on the guy's name. Is a tour player, he'd made about 10 million at the time. And I always get to this spot in the seminar where I talk about playing aggressively to your spots. I roll the little tiger clip where he's saying I play aggressively my spots. And he just sits back and he's just kind of like shaking his head and laughing. I was like, I got to be honest with you, dude. I don't know if you're laughing because this is so dumb or you're so dumb. And he's like, oh, because I'm so dumb. He's like, I do that 7 times around. And again, this is my standard joke, but like, I'm not a unicorn. I know everybody. I know there's other people that do this because there's no way I'm the only idiot that aims away from a pin and then hopes you pull it. And that's where I do believe the outlier shots you see on the PGA Tour would never happen on a driving range. I would love next year at the Nelson to just set up on the range and just have everybody come by. We just hit 2 6-irons at that white flag out there. I don't care about distance. Just hit 2 6-irons at it. And I just want to get 100 shots and show how big the shot pattern is. I've got the one that I use in my seminar all the time with Aaron Wise hitting 27 irons, and the shot pattern was 20 plus yards, 26 yards wide or whatever it was. But then people are like, there's no way it's that, air quotes, bad. And I'm like, okay, well, number 15 at Innisbrook is a 195-yard par 3, and the shot pattern is 50 yards wide and 50 yards deep. There's no chance the shot pattern on the range would be that big. That is all guys trying to be too fancy, trying to get a look at birdie from 195 on a par 3 with a scoring average of 3.2. They're not that bad. And again, I say this as a joke, as a twice failed playing professional, but like, they're not as bad as it seems they are. Well, obviously they're the best players in the world.
But it also speaks to the difficulty or the challenge of playing tournament golf versus golf with your buddies or hitting shots on the range.
I agree with that. Obviously, I agree with that. But it doesn't have to. It's because of this mental loop that we're playing of this is a tournament. I should be freaking out. Like, it doesn't have to be the case.
Right. And then one of the things that's built into the decade system, which I've talked to guys over the years, this outcome that comes of it. And I don't even know if this was something that you kind of planned into it or it was a pleasant surprise after the fact. But if you double down, buy into the system, how it kind of takes the emotions out of the game and thus the results are better. I mean, I think was that something that you kind of found out after the fact, or does that come from the poker mindset too, where it's just like, hey, I'm going with the numbers here?
100%. I mean, again, like back to, I really did do about 6 months of work. I wrote 500 million cells of Excel, like trying to solve this problem with the shot patterns, standard deviations, and strokes to hole out. And then it was only after caddying for Will. So again, I got injured, couldn't play in the Texas Amateur myself. So I called Zalatoris, who's just a kid at my home course. I'm like, let me caddy for you. And on like 6 or 7 in the first round, I was like, this is so dumb. He's at every green. He can for sure be more aggressive than this. Like, this is so dumb. But I'm like, you know what? He's 1 under par. Let's just see what happens. And sure enough, we finished the round. He shot like 67 or 8, and he's leading. And I'm like, well, I mean, could he have played any more aggressive and shot 1 or 2 more? Like, I don't really know, but he striped it. So maybe that was just a really good ball striking day. We come back for the second round, and he was a nervous wreck, and he hit it like shit. He hit it all over the lot, and he shot 71. And I was like, that is it. Some of his misses, it's not that he didn't miss the greens, but he missed the green 3 yards off to a pin that's 5 yards on. That's just a chip shot. But if he had played 3 or so yards more aggressive, now he's 6 yards off to a pin that's 5 yards on. That's starting to become more of a flop shot. Like, it's crazy how it's this 1-to-1 ratio. So if you're 4 yards off to a pin that's 4 yards on, that's 1-to-1. It's pretty much a chip. But just go to 5 or 6. You're not making the chip shot that much longer, but the difficulty goes through the roof really quickly. And so just really realizing we want to stay as close to the edge of the green. So when he did have a bad ball striking day, which you don't know when it's coming, when he did have a bad ball striking day, he was saved a whole bunch. So sure, maybe we're leaving a little on the table on some of your good ball striking days. You're really not. But just if you want to be devil's advocate, but you're saving so much more when you don't happen to hit it good. And over the course of 72 holes, you're simply you're simply not going to hit it good for 72 straight holes. I mean, and if you do, you're going to win that week by a bazillion. I mean, Will, when he won, he was negative strokes gained chipping, and he was only plus 2.5 putting.
Mm-hmm.
And he won because he destroyed it tee to green.
Right.
But even still there, he still hit a bunch of bad shots.
Yeah. And then you went in and caddied for him at the U.S. Junior too. Is that right?
Yeah.
And he won that.
Yeah. So caddied for him at the Texas Amateur, he won. Caddied for him at the U.S. Junior, he won. Actually went and caddied for him at the U.S. Amateur that summer too. And most people don't realize he almost won the U.S. Am that summer.
Right.
He finished third out of the 300. Again, keep in mind, he's just out of high school. He hasn't even started college yet. He finished third out of the 312 in stroke play qualifying. He beat the world number 4 in the first round. He beat Jordan Ebrogi in the second round. And he lost to Zach Olson from Oklahoma State in the third round.
Mm-hmm.
But Zach, he beat him 3-2. Will would have destroyed every other round of 16 match. He just happened to run into the guy that was 5 under, and he was 2 under. Like, that's unfortunate.
So you've had that, that experience caddying for Will, and that kind of aha moment was a great way to test it out. And then you're off to the race. I guess talk a little bit about caddying. 2 things, I guess, just your general thoughts on the job in totality, how you enjoy doing that. And then just kind of maybe a little bit about how you see that caddies that have players that use Decade, should be, working with their players, just how you see the caddying strategy kind of thing coming together in real time.
I loved caddying for Will, but it was literally like I was caddying for my son. I mean, like, I've known this kid since he was 9. Like, I've got skin in the game, even though I'm not even being paid for any of it. I'm paying my own way to go loot for him back. I've caddied for him 2 or 3 times every summer from like 14 through 18 or so, 17. I've caddied on tour for Doc Redman and Martin Flores and Kramer Hickok. Well, Kramer, I guess, was Q School technically. I love it, but man, I don't know how you do it while being worried that you could get fired. Like, this is part of the reason that I wanted to talk to you a little bit was after having played in Q School. So I got drunk with Charles Barkley in early July.
Wait. We got to talk about that.
I was playing golf with Zalatoris out at Maridoe here in Dallas, and we finished at like 3. And he's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I just going home. Just got stuff to do." He's like, "You got to stick out here." I'm like, "Why?" And he goes, Tony Romo and Charles Barkley just finished shooting a Subway commercial. They're on their way out here to hit some balls. I'm like, shit. So we wind up going to the other end of the range, and they just keep bringing vodka Gatorades down there, and wind up getting drinky with Sir Charles. But what's funny is he's actually a funny guy. Like, he actually is funny. Most celebrities are like, "Oh, he's so funny." Like, no, he's not at all. But this guy actually is funny. So I've got a cough still from COVID, and I'm doubled over coughing and laughing so hard that I tear rib muscles. And so the point of the story is I get drunk with Charles Barkley. I hurt myself to where I can't even play golf for 7 weeks. I had to miss the US Am qualifier. My US Mid Am qualifier was the first time that I had touched a golf club in basically 7 weeks. And then I still can't really play leading into the Texas Mid Am. And I shot 73, 71, 72, something like that. Shot even par, finished like 18th. And just a bunch of untight, loose golf shots, not committed. And that finished on a Sunday. Then I had 9 holes Monday, and Tuesday starts Q School. And I had a buddy, actually, my favorite waiter from my local Mexican restaurant. He's a guy named Sam that's trying to play professional golf also. And I'm like, "Well, dude, come caddy for me. You'll learn more than you can imagine by just getting out there in the trenches with me and just watching. So come loot for me." And so on Monday, what I told him, I was like, "Look, my mental game," because I haven't been playing at all, my mental game was pretty bad the last 3 days in the state mid-am. Don't let me hit a single shot without knowing exactly what I'm trying to do with it. So if I'm like mid-swing and I haven't told you, like, say, "Hey, stop," like, stop me. Like, you're not going to piss me off. And I want you to know shape. I want you to know directional target and the exact distance I'm trying to land of every single shot. And it was just amazing the difference in just 3 days from just kind of a bunch of loose, non-committed shots to this is exactly what I'm trying to do with it. And this is where, like, a player and a caddy, I think that making them get that granular it's just the body's amazing. They're going to do a better job of it. Now, again, the point of bringing it all up is like, you also don't want to start pissing your guy off too much because you're afraid of being fired. But I think the players have to realize he's only here to help me. That would be very not self-serving to try to piss me off. So the player has to not let it piss you off when the caddy's being a little nosy, for lack of a better way of saying it. But I think that most players have a hard time with that. I mean, like, again, I've really enjoyed, I've worked with Keith Mitchell now for about a year, and I've really enjoyed the time I've spent with him. He's a good dude. But then there's also times when he's been like a tour pro, and I'm just like, fuck you.
Yeah.
You can't fire me. You're not paying me.
Yeah.
And like, we say it in jest, but there's times where it's like, well, no, I'm just not going to listen to you. You're wrong here, and we're going to talk until you see it. And again, he's a great dude. I really do like him, but they're all going to have their ways they see things, and they're not going to want to see it differently. And like, sometimes you got to see this differently in order to get it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, I think players that understand the fact that the caddy's on their team trying to help them, that kind of push that down, that definitely helped. I mean, the best player caddy combos out there, work that way. And you're right about Keith, like, just in terms of tour players in general, there's also a reason why they're at this elite level that they are. Like, you need this certain ego and belief in yourself. And so it's interesting having you too, and myself too, as as a professional caddy. Like, you're working with the best of the best, so breaking through to the best of the best, you better have some facts to back up what you're saying. Otherwise, they're just going to dismiss you, and sometimes they're going to dismiss you, and it's going to be not for their benefit. But you have to also kind of let them have that and get right back in there again, right?
100%. I mean, again, that's the thing that's probably the hardest about it. And again, this is just where, like you said, they are the best in the world for a reason. Like, people, I love the Twitter polls when people are like, given unlimited funds and time, could a scratch make it on tour? Like, what do you think these people are? They all have unlimited time and funds. Again, like, within reason, but like mini tour guys, corn fair guys, they're trying, and they're also freaks of nature. No, Mr. Scratch, given the infinite time, you could not make it.
Yeah.
Everyone, I don't know what it is with golf. Like, I don't think I could make it in the NBA.
Right.
Why is it that everybody thinks they could do?
Well, it's because we get to play it. I mean, we don't go play basketball. I mean, you maybe go play your pickup game at 45, but you're not out playing. I mean, the Champions Tour, you mentioned that. So I think that's the main reason why people compare that one, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I'm saying the fact that people actually think they could make it is comical.
Well, the new one, what the new one is though now is curling and the Olympics, right? That's the new one where everybody says I can do that, and that's a whole nother one. We could do a podcast about curling, and the fact of the matter is that none of us probably could do that at an Olympic level.
No, not even close. Those guys, it looks like a lot of fun, man. They're sliding that rock with such precision, and I don't know what the sport is. I saw this sport the other day. I'm watching all these dumb YouTube videos. It was like a ball, but it's not a ball. It's almost like a wheel that's a ball. So it would sit flat on one side, but then they're rolling it kind of like curling or like shuffleboard. And this guy rolled this curl that like went out and around and off the thing, and it curled between these two rocks. It's total luck, I'm sure, but the way it rolled around and then it just tapped the one in the middle that he was trying to, I'm like, that was insane from like 50 yards, but he's got a better chance of pulling that off than me.
Oh, and I'm watching these like Frisbee golfers. I follow some of them on YouTube, and that's incredible, like how they carve those in there sometimes.
It's funny actually, because one of the notes that I made over here actually that I definitely don't want to forget to say, just because we're talking about like a player and caddy interaction. The other thing that I'll say about Will, and again, Will, if you're listening to this, love you like a son, buddy, but I've said this to him a million times, he kind of pouts. He definitely has negative downward energy when stuff's not going his way. And that was one of the things Ryan Palmer back in 2015, the first tour event I went out and caddied for Zalatoris and was at Riviera. And Ryan, I went to Texas A&M. He got there the year after I finished. But I asked him, like, dude, you've been out here for 20 years. Like, no offense, I didn't see this coming whatsoever from you. But obviously, you're a great player. You were great younger. I just remember playing some Tight Lice Tour stuff with him. I'm like, what do you think it is? He's like, honestly, I don't get mad. He's obviously a pretty chill dude. He's like, if I start getting upset, I just don't let my eyes get below the horizon. Just try to walk with a better attitude. And Will definitely has a tendency to get pouty, but this is where he was extremely open-minded. I think he really respected me as a player and a person back when we first started this in 2014, 15, 16. And I had the ability to tell him, like, hey, you're pouting. Whereas, like most people, the caddy told a player, you're pouting. It's not going to go well.
No.
But I had the ability to say that to him, and he had the ability to, like, okay, let's analyze. What are you talking about here? Am I? And then he had the ability to correct it. And I do think that a lot of the tour players that I work with, when they're like, I want to take it to the next level, and I'm like, cool, here's how we're going to do it. Like, you want to know what Will did? Here's what we did to be prepared. You have to have a plan, when the shit's hitting the fan, you got to have a plan for how you're not going to freak out. And a lot of that comes back to meditation. But again, just having a good player caddy relationship where the caddy can say, hey, I'm just going to mention this. You look a little down. Do you need a little snack? Do you need to take a breather? Whatever. I'm just telling you, you don't have a good look. And people be like, does that really matter? Like, yeah, it does, actually. Yeah. The people used to fire back at me like, Tiger gets as mad as anyone. I'm like, at least he looks like he's going to kick your ass. Like, he's not pouting. Certainly, I've never seen Tiger pout. Again, he might get mad, but at least it looked like, hey, let's stay out of that dude's way for a couple holes, where some guys look like they might start crying at any given moment.
That's an art to caddying too, right? Is kind of knowing your player and knowing how to push his buttons and all that stuff. It's fascinating in that respect.
There's a reason Bones and Steve Williams and these great caddies keep getting the same good bags. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy at some point, but also they're doing something right. I mean, Lance Bennett was one of my roommates back 15 years or 20 years ago here in Dallas. And I just always remember, like, I love Lance. I lived with the dude. But I remember thinking, like, you just kind of can't get out of his way when he was working as an assistant at Glen Eagles here in Dallas. And then he just goes out and immediately is a great caddy. And I'm like, he's doing something right. I don't know what it is. And then as we've talked over the years about it, he's like, yeah, I feel like I pick up on a lot of that stuff. And I'm able to help the player manage it well and get out of their own way a lot. I'm like, that's a big part of it.
That's funny you say that. I was out in Sea Island and we were paired on Sunday with Davis Riley, and Lance is on the bag. And it's funny, we came up on, I think, the 17th hole. I looked in the lounge and the President's Cup trophy was on display. And obviously Davis loved running the tournament, and he had it in town that week. And I leaned over and I said, how many times have you drank out of that trophy before? And he said, a lot of times, at least 3 different times, and how many beers can go in and stuff. And I also remember with Lance, Ian Baker Finch one time on a broadcast was talking about him and kind of singing his praises and just saying how the best caddies find the best jobs. Like, that's a big part of being a good caddy, is seeking out these jobs. And he's always done a great job of that throughout his career.
LPGA or PGA. Like, everyone he's worked with has played great. And I think Davis Riley is one of the best players in the future. I think they're going to be an amazing combination for the next decade.
Oh, he's very impressive. And I remember seeing him out on the Korn Ferry Tour maybe like 3 years ago or so. And he's got that look to him. I mean, there's a lot of these guys, like a Will Zalatoris back when you saw him, like sometimes just kind of the way they tuck their shirt in, the way they carry themselves. I mean, some guys just kind of stand out more than others. And then there's these wild cards too, where it's like, you didn't go to some amazing college, university, but you've kind of got the goods to get it done, and they kind of make their way up through the minor leagues a little bit.
Davis Riley, that's who Will beat in the finals of the U.S. Junior, and he had lost the prior year in the finals. And I legitimately, I felt bad because I'm like, I can't imagine losing back-to-back years in the finals of the U.S. Junior. And I've talked to Davis about it, and he's like, well, yeah, it sucked, but it just gave me more and more resolve to just keep doing it. And like you say, the dude, you just look at him and you're like, you got it.
Yeah.
Like, you've got it. And it's just a matter of figuring it out. But he's a guy like Duval that once he wins one, he's going to win in bunches.
Yeah. I think he should win one next year. There's a lot of guys that should win one next year that are young. This young crop's really good right now.
But a lot of what, like with Davis specifically, the week before he lost in the playoff this year at Innisbrook, and the reason I always talk about number 15 at Innisbrook is just I've got it in the videos. The green is 28 yards wide. It's a big green on a par 3 at 200 yards. But you know what? At the end of the day, if you're just aiming at the middle of the green and hitting your stock shot, these guys shouldn't miss it that much. But like I say, then the shot patterns are massive. Well, that hole specifically, it just worked out conveniently where Davis and I were hitting balls with Braden Thornberry, again, out here at Merido down on the other end. And I was explaining to him, I'm like, go look at number, let's hit 10 6-irons here and look at the shot pattern. It's like 25 yards wide. That green's 28 yards wide, dude. Here's the shot link images of how the shot patterns actually look like. you should be able to aim at the middle of that green and basically never miss it. And then it's just a little bit of luck if you happen to pull it when the pin's on the left or push it when the pin's on the right. But given, 1,000 iterations, it will work out. So if we spread golf balls all over that green and put the pin anywhere on that green, you're going to have some close accidentally, you're going to have some far accidentally, but you should average basically 2 putts, holing them all out from all over the green. Okay. Well, now if it's not that hard to hit the green and it's not that hard to average 2 putts to hole out, that's a 3 scoring average. And that hole historically has been in the 3.1 to 3.2 range. The one day specifically that I'm always using, the scoring average was 3.22.
That back right pin.
Yeah, and if you tried to, if you make a 3 on a hole with a 3.22 scoring average, you've gained 0.22 shots against the competition. If you did that 72 times, that's almost 16 shots. You would literally win every single golf tournament if you beat the field average by 16. And I'm explaining that to Davis, and he's like, I'm not saying it's great math. It's the principle of the idea. Like, par gets you closer to winning, even if the winning score is 20 under. Par gets you closer. And also, bogey on this hole doesn't lose a full shot. It loses 0.8 shots. And once you start shifting your mindset around and thinking in fractions of shots, you just rarely gain or lose a full shot. Like, it just doesn't happen. It's little tenths of shots. But then more importantly, what I'm explaining with this idea is, somebody like, well, tomorrow, the next course is easy next week. It's going to take 20 to win. Maybe it'll take 15, maybe it'll take 25. But I know what it does take, 12 to 14 shots clear of the field average. That's what the winning score is basically every week on tour. So the year that Zach Johnson won the Masters, he was 14 shots clear of the field average, and he was 1 over par. Last year when Cameron Smith won the Tournament Champions at 34 under, he was 14 shots clear of the field average. So now if you start thinking in terms of tenths of shots, you're again, I would rather you not think about winning at all, but if you're going to, at least think about it in a productive way. Not I need to get to X, I need to gain X. And just par is quite often, again, when Tiger says it all the time, par is a great score here. I don't think he knows exactly what he was saying there, but like literally par actually gets me closer to winning, even if the winning score is 20 under. It's like, that doesn't really make sense, but it does.
That's interesting. You said that about the 12 to 14 shots better than tour average. I've never heard it put that way. And you look at that 16 shot example you gave Davis the week before he played really well. Like Tiger used to do that a lot, right? He'd win by 8 shots or so. Like he would just, because he was making those decisions and just parring people to death. And then obviously when guys were making bogeys, that was like a huge gain.
And that's the whole deal, is even if you're on the 72nd hole and you need a birdie to win, like, it's out of your control. Like, I hate saying that. The best player, I say, like, stop trying to make birdies. Winning requires luck. The better player makes more birdies, not because they're trying to, just because they can, with a tighter shot pattern that's probably longer off the tee and a little bit better putter. Like, it's all just going to add up. But the main way that we're going to score better is by eliminating bogeys, not by making more birdies, which gets back to the Tiger 5 that I talk a lot about, which came from Lance Bennett and a couple other caddies out there. Talking about Tiger in the early 2000s, tracked how many bogeys on par 5s, how many doubles, how many 3 putts, how many blown easy saves, and how many bogeys with 9 iron or less. And he was trying to keep those 5 things to 6 or less per tournament, which sounds crazy. Like, those things aren't that hard to do. And yet he's like, I'm going to do this 1.5 times a round. And if I do that, I'll win. And literally the number 6.4, like we quantified it and go look at the numbers, and 6.4 of those points is what the average is for a 1st to 5th place finish.
Wow.
And so then the point of that is that dovetails in, as I always say, like 100% of our rounds of golf, we think we should have shot lower, but then we don't do anything like, well, why do I feel like that? I think that's what Tiger probably did. Like, should have shot lower, should have shot lower. What makes me think that not because I feel like I should have hit a 7 iron or a 4 iron close, or I should have made a 20-footer. It's because of one of those 5 things. So Tiger then just shut it down. He's like, I'm going to stop doing that. And the main one is bogey inside 150. From 97 through the middle of the 99 season, Tiger averaged, I think it's 2.4 bogeys from inside 150 per round. And then in the middle of the 99 season was when he kind of got it, when he won 7 of his last 11 starts or something like that. And so from 97 through the middle of 99 compared to middle of 99 through like 05, he dropped a full shot just by making fewer bogeys inside of 150. I'm sure some of that is better wedge play, but a lot of it is just stop trying to make birdies and just trust birdies will be there. But you can't make enough birdies to offset bogeying 20% of the time from inside 150. Like, it's such an obvious statement, yet nobody gets it.
Right. Yeah, you're only going to scratch and claw yourself back to level on that, or barely
At
above
best.
it. Yeah, at best. One of the things we talked about earlier is you said, well, everybody knows I'm a proponent of distance. That's another thing that's kind of clicked for me in my caddying. At Sea Island, it was super helpful. Just thinking about more conservative targets and being able to hit a lot more drivers out there. And you referenced Bryson's win at the U.S. Open in 2019. Was it 2019?
2020.
At Winged Foot, and how he just ripped that place to shreds, doing it his own way. I don't know. That was a big aha moment for a lot of people, I think. But explain a little bit just the banging it out there, having kind of a target that goes in with your shot dispersion pattern too, and then maybe why that particular week was a perfect storm for him.
If you go back, because remember that was the fall U.S. Open 2020, and if you go back to the PGA Championship that Morikawa won, I mean, literally the Sunday night leading into that week, I'm having a conversation with Como, kind of going over the game plan and everything, and just like, it's literally driver everywhere on this course. I mean, 3-wood, you just don't hit it much straighter than driver. So yes, you might hit 5 to 7-ish% of the more fairways, which literally over the course of 54 holes, I mean, literally, let's call it 7% times 56 tee shots. It's a fairway a round. So that's by dropping back to 3-wood, but you're going to have 30 or 40 yards longer on 100% of those shots. And so you've really just got to accept that, like, certain spots, it's just driver. And so Bryson did drop back at the PGA at Harding Park too much. And I told Como after, I'm like, dude, I'm making up the holes here, but if it's a driver on 7, it's a driver on 14. It's the same hole. But you just feel weird not being smart and dropping back some. Well, now going into the U.S. Open at Winged Foot, I'm like, dude, it's a driver on every single hole here, except the ones when his shape doesn't work, which actually comically was 2 and 8, I believe, which then he went too much the other direction. He dropped back to 3-wood too much at Harding Park, but then he didn't technically drop back enough on the 2 holes that dogleg left to right. And those are the only ones he materially missed the fairways by. And so the real key is just, you don't get to place the ball in the fairway just because you've dropped back. And just because you hit driver as hard as you possibly can doesn't mean you're never going to accidentally hit the fairway. And so, like, number 6 at Winged Foot is the drivable-ish par 4. And I like to take full credit for getting Peter Kessler banned from Twitter for for what happened here. But like, he was posting like only an idiot would go for number 6 at Winged Foot, and someone asked me for comment. I'm like, technically, only an idiot wouldn't. And Peter erupts on me. And just sure enough, I'm like, watch, this is what will happen next week. A certain amount of guys will lay up in the first round, and they will lay up. The ones that hit the fairway will probably lay up again in the second round. But the ones who miss the fairway will be like, screw that, and hit driver. And progressively fewer people will lay up each round. And that is exactly what happened. And it's just funny because it's just like Tenet Riviera, just sending it down there as far as you can and then figuring it out from there. Okay, now it either worked or it didn't. And the real key is like on number 6 at Winged Foot is you send driver, and even if the pin's on the left and you miss the green 30 yards left, people are like, you're screwed. I'm like, well, sure, but can't you hit the green and 2-putt it, move on? The real key is the discipline to get off the accelerator.
Yeah.
So we try to be super aggressive off the tee. And then if you wind up in a bad spot, the key is having the discipline to just dump it on the green, 2-putt it, move on, try it again tomorrow. And that's what Bryson did just so perfectly at Winged Foot. I mean, he just sent it. Well, I literally texted Como before the final round started because so many people were just screwed. Like early on, the rough was clearly so bad. And I think the guy in the group in front of Bryson actually lost his ball left of 1. I texted Como, I'm like, this is the freest money ever. He is going to destroy these people because nobody's hitting fairways. It's too fast. So I'd rather have 40 or 50 yards less in the rough. And people be like, that's not the art of the game. I'm like, it is. It's funny because when Tiger turned pro, everyone's like, he'll never win the Grand Slam because he'll never win the US Open. He doesn't hit it straight enough. And it's funny because it's like, actually, that's the easiest one to win. Think about the people who've won the US Open. Nicklaus, Watson, Johnny Miller. Like, it's the bombers that win that golf tournament. I mean, sure, you've got Tom Kite and Corey Pavin in there also, but that's just, we play a tournament 100 times. You're going to have some variance, but that tournament is disproportionately won by bombers.
Interesting. Yeah, great comment about the discipline. I mean, that's kind of where people kind of mess it up from there, right? Like, I didn't hit my best drive, but then they don't take their medicine, and that contributes to it. But then they only reflect on the fact that they put themselves in the spot to begin with. So, I mean, that's kind of the big takeaway there after you kind of, get it out there.
We all accidentally compare one outcome to one outcome. So they're like, I'd rather be 140 in the fairway than 110 in the rough. And while that statement is accurate, you won't always be in the fairway at 140 and you won't always be in the rough at 110. And that's what destroys the math quickly.
I see. All right. What do you take of where Bryson's at right now in his career?
Rich?
Huh?
Rich? Yeah, it's funny. I have not watched any live golf yet. It's not like I couldn't care less either way. I'm actually a pretty big proponent of, well, if we think these are awful people and we want them to catch up with the world, we probably need to help them. Like, trying to shut them into a corner like North Korea is not going to help at all. They've got money, so they're going to just bully their way in the front door. So we might as well be friendly. So it's not like I have an ethical argument against it. I literally just don't watch it. I don't watch much golf anyway. So I don't really know how he's done in live or anything. I don't know how anyone's done in live, to be perfectly honest.
Well, I mean, I think for him though, I mean, he's had this kind of the bit of a roller coaster, just even with the injuries and then the long drive pursuit. And like, it's just kind of, he's such a fascinating character to watch.
I think he's probably enjoying being the big fish in a smaller pond. I think he's probably really enjoys that. Again, this is where it's hard for the guy. Like, is he weird? Sure. Am I weird? Yeah. I think that a lot of people who do some cool things are kind of a little weird, especially PGA Tour players. I mean, it is a certain person that's going to find a sport you can't perfect and then try to perfect it and keep coming back for more. It's a pretty weird person. And so, I do like trying to give Bryson a grain of salt and just be like, yeah, people, give the guy, he's somewhere on the spectrum. You give a person who's somewhere on the spectrum $100 million and make them famous and be like, okay, now don't screw this up. Good luck. Like, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. So I do think that I do hate that a guy like Bryson can't play in more tour events, because I do want to see the best players playing each other. I don't know.
Well, I need to go watch. Tiger had his press conference today at his tournament, and we'll be dropping this podcast, I guess, tomorrow or the day before. And he had some interesting comments, and we don't need to go too far down that rabbit hole. But I mean, yeah, it would be nice to have. That's the one part about this that has sucked for the golf fans, not for the players. The players, the caddies, everybody's doing really well right now for the most part. But the fans, where it's like, hey, why can't I watch all my guys, in one place? Well, one debate that's come out of that, and I don't really care about it much. It's kind of hard to analyze, but it is kind of shows you how this is a problem in that respect is who's the number one player in the world right now if you had to choose between Cam Smith and Rory McIlroy?
I'm going with Rory.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy's just, and I understand Cam Smith's really, really good at golf too. I fully get that. But there's just a distance component. And I don't know. I mean, maybe Cam hits it further than I think he does. I think he does it mainly with putting. He's obviously solid all around. But there's just a certain level of dynamic you don't have. And it's funny because actually the live golf thing, when people say I'm playing for, history or legacy or whatever, I think the guys that make the most sense in going to live are the Brysons and the Cam Smiths who have won a major recently, because I do think that they have to respect you won a major, you're in the next 5 years. Like, if one of the majors chooses not to honor that, I would think that's pretty crappy.
I don't think that's going to happen. You're right.
Yeah, and so those guys that are like, well, I'm in the next five, and if I don't win one in the next five, I'm probably not going to get to 14. So I may as well take some money, play some golf, and play the majors. And then if I don't, then hey, I'm in my mid 30s, and it all worked out well. I do think that like Cam and Bryson and DJ, because DJ's like, I didn't really want to play golf till I'm 50, so cool. This is just all the more reason. But then there's the other ones, the Patrick Reed, where I'm like, I don't understand it at all. How I don't care how much money he got. The next week after signing, he's flying to Singapore to get world ranking points. Like, show me one thing you bought with your 50 million that you couldn't have bought anyways. I mean, at some point, it is just obnoxious. Like, you can only spend so much money. So I don't understand it from that standpoint.
That's interesting. So a couple bigger picture items, and then we'll do a little rapid fire at the end. One, I guess, I'm just intrigued by, I mean, your email inbox has got to be full. Your text message got to be full. Like, you have so many people contacting you, and let's just focus on not even the high level amateurs or the people that have money that can get to you. Like the top end pros. Like, there's a couple stories that came out last year that I was fascinated by. One was, I got a call from Bambi. He said, hey, do you want to work for a guy at Pebble Beach next week, his Champions Tour? And I was like, oh, I don't know. I can either do one of this one or the other one. And let me talk to my wife. And I ended up saying, no to him. And then he told me who it was. Or no, he told me who it was right away. He goes, Robert Carlson. And I was like, okay. And this is on a Thursday. And so I'm like, let me get back to you. And by the time I got back to him, he said he offered it to somebody else. I was like, all right, no big deal. Well, then Friday, Robert Carlson goes out in Sioux City, just up the road from here, Sioux Falls, and shoots like 9 under par. And I'm like, oh my God, like what a dumb move. Like, I wasn't going to keep caddying for him that week, and he ended up withdrawing from Pebble Beach. But then I come to find out that you were working with Robert Carlson like the week before. So like, that's an example. There's examples all the time where guys in their pressers afterwards will be like, last week I started working with Scott Fawcett, or I downloaded the Decade app. Like, talk me through how proud that makes you, how those interactions go, and then maybe your favorite one from even this season.
I mean, it is cool. I do laugh. Whenever I quit playing professional golf 20 years ago, I wanted to start teaching, but I'm like, I just don't have 10 years of learning how to teach. It's a grind. I want to keep playing more. And so to accidentally get involved in a deal where I really am teaching like the vast majority of the people under the age of 27 on tour. And this is where it is funny is yes, my inbox it's impossible to keep up, but I don't charge these guys because I don't want to go out to tour events. I just trust, what, I'm going to make money on selling the Decade app. And at the end of the day, also, it's just kind of fun. Like, I enjoy it. And so Robert Carlson, who had bought the app and was a member for a while, he contacted me. He's like, can you just help me go through the stats? Just help me clean up some thoughts. I think he was like 37th or 38th at the time, keeping 35 on the Charles Schwab points list. And I think he finished second that first week. And again, I do hate saying this because people, the easy, cynical response would be like, well, why don't they just keep finishing second? I honestly believe it's so hard to do what I teach week in and week out that we just need a refresher to just constantly, well then, yeah, if I'm going to talk to you every week, then I'm going to need to charge you. I just don't want to do that, to be perfectly honest. I want to figure it out. But it is crazy how consistently, I bet I work with one-on-one fewer players on a weekly basis than most people think I do. But it is crazy how consistently those players that week do well. Like it's honestly, I'm not a full-on conspiracy theorist that this is the Matrix and we're all just living in a simulation. But there are times where I'm like, this is stupid. Like, it just happens so consistently where within the next 2 or 3 weeks, Davis Riley last year losing in a playoff. Keith Mitchell had missed 7 of his prior 11 cuts. Have a conversation, finishes third to Rory and Colin at the CJ Cup last year. Robert McIntyre back in September. I just need a refresher course. Cool. 3 weeks later, he wins. Like, it really happens a lot. Mm-hmm. And it's fun. It really, it's pretty crazy. Because what's fun for me is I do believe, and this is why the stuff like with Brad Faxon and them, I take it so serious, is if I were a young player, I'm teaching you what I needed to hear to not only play better golf, but to just be a more sane, less of an asshole person. And so I do hope that some of these guys I'm helping just be a little bit happier. And then also sometimes like you can just use data to refute certain points. Like I had to mark my comeback putts. No, you didn't. Like that's just not true. But if a junior golfer and a college golfer, a mini tour player here's facts and arguably the best putter to ever walk the planet say, I had to mark my comeback putts. There is no other way that can be interpreted than putt aggressively. And it's not what he did. It's what he thinks he did. Even still had somebody tell me just the other day that they heard him give a presentation. He was like, well, the people are now telling me that apparently this isn't what I did, but I still don't believe it. I'm like, fuck, seriously? You still don't believe it? I don't know what to say, man. That's what's frustrating.
Last one, and then we'll get in the rapid fire. Who are some, because you're at the forefront of all this, like you're part of this science of golf thing. I shout out to Will Haskett on his book that's coming in the mail to me. What are some ideas or some people in the game of golf right now that intrigue you, that you're excited by, heading into next year and beyond?
It's funny because I don't know that this name would have come to me without the 4-iron challenge, but the guy James Hart Dupree, from that 6'9" kid out of South Africa. I mean, I went and watched him play at the Nelson and it was just like, I've never seen anything like this. And so to take a guy, I do actually believe that 195 mile an hour ball speed is like the upper end of what's actually usable. I don't think 205 is cool, but I don't think you can actually play your best golf at 205. I really don't. And I think that's why a guy like James Sadowski and all, Eddie Fernandez on the senior stuff, like it's just why they struggle. You just can't shut that speed down enough for irons. And your shot pattern just ultimately becomes so big. But like a guy that's intriguing is James, that guy literally just posted, and I couldn't believe the 4-iron. He had 128 mile an hour club head speed with a 4-iron. He carried it 280. And I'm like, that's insane. So guys like that, there's a bunch of them coming from college.
Who's that kid? The kid at Texas. There's a big kid at Texas, right? Morrison is his last name?
Tommy Morrison. Yeah. I mean, yeah, Bernie Najar asked me, this was the U.S. junior that was at Inverness in Toledo, probably 2018 or 19. Bernie asked me, he's like, I want you to come see this kid. I was up there to do a presentation, but I was like, I want you to come see this kid. Or just come out here and help me work with this player. He didn't mention he's 6'8" or anything like that. And I'm walking across the course and I'm texting with Bernie trying to find him. And he's like, I'm right here on the green you're staring at. Stop staring at Tommy. And I'm like, I can't. And then all of a sudden I see Bernie. I'm like, holy shit, this kid, he was 14 at the time and he's 6'7".
Right.
And I mean, it's just a giant lever. You can't beat that. I mean, again, you obviously can, but like given 1,000 people at 6'8", there's going to be a couple of them that can keep it in play. I mean, I do think that where we've got on the PGA Tour right now, making up a number, 165 to 185 mile an hour ball speeds, like a 20 mile an hour window. I do expect that to just obviously go faster, but I also expect it to compress. So I do think that 195 is going to be the upper end of what you see people who are successful on tour being. And I think the lower end to average is going to be in that 185 to 187 ball speed. So that's going to compress from a 20 mile an hour window, and it might even be bigger than that right now, down to like a 12 to a 15 mile an hour window, because everybody's going to do that. Like there's just, again, what I said after Bryson won the US Open, I was just like, I can't wait to watch everyone screw this up. And I did not think Rory would be the first one to do it. I mean, he came out and exactly what he said was, I just started trying to hit it harder. I'm like, that's not what Bryson did. He did a lot of other work. Now, what Rory's problem is he's already done the physical work. He can't get much stronger than he is. So he doesn't have a whole lot of room at 5'10" or whatever he is to get it into that low 190s. But even he's in that, I mean, his ball speed was up like 4 miles an hour or something last year.
Yeah. It's enough though. It's enough right now. You just got to be happy with what you got, right?
Yeah. But I mean, again, like if you don't think 100% of people on tour, whether they'll admit it or not, it's totally that Happy Gilmore when Shooter's off swinging in the woods. Like I guarantee you, everybody on tour is swinging in the woods right now, trying to find some speed. And again, like this is what's there's a kid named William Knauth, I don't actually know how you pronounce his last name. He won the Nelson Award at Carnegie Mellon last year. Really solid player. He's in the PhD stats program at Columbia now, like smart kid who's a good player. And he and I were talking because he really wanted to try to play professional golf. I'm like, your ball speed's 172 to 174 right now. If you hadn't been speed training and lifting already, I would say you've got a chance, but you're kind of at your limit here, and that's just not going to cut it in a couple of years. It's just not.
Interesting. All right. Well, we'll get you out of here on these things. What's the best course you've ever played?
Augusta National.
What's the course you'd most want to play?
Augusta National.
What course that you haven't played would you most want to play?
I would say St. Andrews. I mean, again, like I don't really care about history and all that stuff for the most part, but that's a spot that if I got to my deathbed and never played it, I'd be like, really? You lazy ass, you didn't put a trip together and go play it? Like, it's pretty astounding that I haven't done that yet.
What's your career low round to par? How deep have you gotten it?
10 under.
What's the proudest moment in your career, either playing or now in this kind of new career?
I would honestly say the times caddying for Will. My proudest moment personally is making it to the final stage of Q school as a 35-year-old amateur. Just because it just showed me what I thought. I'm better than my results in my 20s were, and it's largely because I didn't have enough experience to understand strategy, and I was a lunatic. So that was enough information for me. Like, okay, I'm not the guy that's like I could have done it, I could have been great, but like I feel like I could have been a really good player had I known what I know now. So that's my favorite. But standing on that green when Will won the U.S. Junior, just because he qualified for it as a 12-year-old, as a 13-year-old, as a 14-year-old, as a 15-year-old, and then he didn't qualify at 16, and he was beat down. And I just remember telling him each year, like, you just keep doing what you're doing. You're going to win this golf tournament. Like, just keep doing what you're doing. And then to actually have been able to be there with him when he won was just like, there's a video where I kind of like bend over and I just kind of lean back and I'm laughing, looking around because I'm like, this is not real. Like, I can't believe I'm standing here.
Yeah. So satisfying. All right. Last question I always ask all my guests. It sounds like you're a Masters guy. So let's use that. Let's say you're playing in the Masters. I'm caddying for you. You're having a hell of a week. You got a 1-shot lead on Saturday going into the final round. I mean, this is going to be awesome. Maybe going to slip on the green jacket. I'm out and about the night before. I slip and fall, break my leg, so I can't go on Sunday. So you can call anyone in the world to come caddy for you the final round of the Masters to get it done. Who are you going to call?
Steve Williams, I would assume.
Yep, it's a good choice.
I've never met him. I don't know anything about him, but the balls that it takes for Tiger Woods to be in the middle of a swing and call him off, like he did that one time. I'm sure he did it more than once, but he is literally like, stop. That dude, the confidence that it takes to do that. And again, that's only from caddying for Will that I would not have realized how hard of a job y'all have. Because again, you're trying not to get fired. You're trying to help the guy shoot the best score he can. But also sometimes you're just going to have to disagree. Be like, that's just wrong.
The read he had for Adam Scott in the playoff, they heard about him talk about that before. And I heard Adam Scott talk about it, about, saying, hey, is this what it does, Steve? And he says, no, it's twice that. I mean, to be able to volunteer that in the biggest moment, that you're right, that does take balls. And that's why he's one of the best caddies of all time.
Would y'all in the caddy circles, y'all recognize, like, is there a five that are kind of all the same, or is there a clear GOAT?
I don't know if there's a clear GOAT. I think a lot of it has to do with how you mesh with your player. There's certain guys that maybe haven't had as many reps with other players. And that's obviously the idea of it all, right? Like, you want to have your one player for a long period of time. And so there's certain guys that maybe fall under that category. Like, he's the best caddy for his player. He maxes that guy out. And then there's other guys where it's like, you could put him on anybody's bag and he's going to do a great job for him. There is a Mount Rushmore of sorts, for sure.
Well, it's similar. And I'll end on this last story, but there is a similar idea to when I first started doing all this. I went down to the PGA show. It was either 2015 or 17. I think it was 2015 because I was really fresh at doing it. And I was sitting in the audience of the Hall of Fame instructor induction, which was like Ledbetter, Haney, Chuck Cook, Butch, and another couple people, and they were just doing like a round table. And my buddy Grant Masson said, he's like, I kind of know what everyone up there teaches, but I have no idea what Butch teaches. Like, if you came to me and said, I want a Hank Haney lesson, I could give you the exact lesson he would give you, or a number of different instructors. But I was like, that's a really good point. I don't know what he teaches. So I went home from there and I went into a YouTube wormhole of trying to figure out what he teaches. And everything I found from him was basically course management, how to score. And I was like, that makes sense, because what my buddy said was, I don't know what he teaches, but all of his players play well or play better. And that to me is what a great caddy is. If I could take anyone and make you play better, well, what are you doing? Like, you just understand the game better. And again, that's why there are better coaches in football. And there's a reason. And that's what I think a caddy is essentially a coach, but you're supposed to be there coaching the X's and O's. And I don't know that prior to, decade or data, that was a quantified enough idea. Like, we've got to miss it in the right spots, or you can't go above the hole on this hole, or just all the stuff. It's like, no, that's just not how it works, actually. Yeah. And so now you guys can do your job a lot better because you have something definitive you can stand on. And then there's just times, again, that's what I do with players. I'm like, well, you're just wrong. And we'll sit here on this webinar as long as we have to get you to understand that. But what you just said is incorrect. And we're going to figure out how to get you to see that, because you're going to be a much better player by understanding that.
Yeah. Hey, well, Scott, it's great to get a little bit of your time, sit down. I've been wanting to do this for a while. So thanks for taking the time out. It's been great to catch up with you.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it as always.
We'll be back soon with another podcast, so please subscribe. And in the meantime, make sure to follow the Caddie Network on all your social media channels. I'm host John Rathouz. Thank you for listening.